Hello, and thank you for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast. This is a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take a verbal walk around various topics that come up from time to time when you engage in this endeavor we call visual storytelling. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other host is...
Hello, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I'm a user experience designer, and I also make video games. How you doing, Jerzy?
I'm doing okay. Is this is not our last show of the year. I almost said this is our last show of the year, but we have one more next week on the 27th of December.
Yeah,
if I'm not
one
mistaken.
more to go.
The 28th. What? What's the date today?
It'd be-
27th.
Yep, 27th.
Today's the 20th. So if you're new to this show, and I get emails every once in a while from people who discover, the podcasting that we do, like from Lean Into Art instead of from the older stuff that we've done in the past, like the Polytechnicast, Thunder Punch Daily, Art and Story, Comics Are Great, and so on. If you're brand new, we are going to spend about an hour talking about a topic that comes up as we engage in visual storytelling endeavors. In my case, making comics. In Rob's case, doing user interface, user experience, game design, and we break it into two sections, usually like a what it looks like and then how we think about it section, and then we wrap up with a final thought at the end. A couple of breaks in between to talk about some various things that we're interested in sharing with you in terms of products that we make and people that we have to thank. So, with that, what are we talking about this week, Rob?
Well, we are talking about gearing up for goal planning, and it's probably includes taking a look back at the past year. And this is something that we tend to we visit a lot. I think there's I did not prepare a list of episodes that would sort of be a part of this thought where you've got, I think some of it will come up just naturally in conversation, but definitely if you did a search, if you go to leanintoart.com and you click on the search thing and you look for goals, it's like it comes up a lot because it goes hand in hand with our the thing that we like to also talk a lot about, which is practicing reflection. And this is like doing that for the granularity of a year.
And this is the time of year where a lot of us are thinking about that kind of thing. In another week, it's going to be New Year's, at least in Western traditions, New Year's. And that is often a time of recalibration, goal setting. Unless you're David Say, then you do it on February 2nd. We'll talk more about Dave Say, I'm sure, as this episode progresses. davidsay.com. Well, how about I just hit the music then? And we head over to the first section. What do you say, Rob?
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. Well, speaking of jumping in, ba-boom.
What's the castle?
That's meant to get us all fired up to talk about this topic. So, again, for new listeners, I'm just thinking about new listeners a lot this week. You do a fairly robust annual planning session with your whole family, Rob. And I wonder if you could describe it real quick, and then we can dive into what it looks like specifically.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, how robust is it across the whole family? It's definitely not an imposing thing on the kids. For the kids, it's more having a few conversations and looking back and saying, like what are some things that we're grateful for in the past year, and we can take a look back at some family photos and little like sort of a light, approachable version of what Kate and I do. And it's typically after Kate and I have done at least a few days, maybe a couple of weeks of part-time here and there, digging through our past experience and whatever. So we're ready for these conversations with some prompts and ideas for the kids. And then we try to, on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, do a sort of a big visual of this as one of those giant sticky note like it's like a easel pad sized sticky note, and then we end up just putting that up on the wall where we can see it throughout the year. So we end up capturing some stuff about, well, what is Kate working to bring about this year? What am I bringing about this year? And then each of our kids, and then maybe like a group family thing too. And just in the idea of like, well, having some intention for the time ahead is just it's something that I've found great benefit of engaging with, and even when it's gone well, or when things have happened that are very different than what I set out to do, it's at least this sort of planted flag bookmark that I can evaluate. Oh, well, what happened and why, and how do I want to go about that differently this next time? And so hopefully we can all do that as a group.
So I wonder if you can break that down to like simple, like sort of buckets of what kinds of, I mean, and I like how I just want to underline that you were very quick to point out that this isn't some kind of Dickensian thing where you're telling your children, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? Who should be punished? It's more or less of like how, if you, what kind of buckets are you as a family navigating as you're reviewing the year past?
Well, so common one. Think about aspects of your life that you would find it beneficial to have new outcomes, or building upon something you've already started. So think about like, what are you creating? Or your creative projects would be a really straightforward one. Maybe new skills you want to learn or improve at, or thinking about other roles. Like, well, for me, I think about how do I want to grow as a parent, and how do I physical fitness is important. I consider that, and community and professional commitments, I think, are some big buckets there. So for the kids, we do not impose the idea of buckets. If something comes up incidentally, that's great, but it's typically things like, I want to run a lot this in the year ahead. I want to get into gymnastics more, that kind of thing, right? Comes up. Or let's see, to to read a lot. I mean, really approachable things that gets captured, and then it becomes a great thing to talk about in a year. So is that what you were getting at, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that is. I want to sort of characterize some of the language and the approach that you use as a sort of like a frame of reference, and as a case in point for people who are thinking about, as they're approaching the end of the year, thinking about doing their own reflection / planning session. What does the conversation look like at Rob's families? So I'm curious. I'm not going to speak for your family or for you, but I'm saying, as somebody who has an inner voice that sometimes pops up from time to time and says, yeah, good luck with that, buddy. when I'm brainstorming things like, I'd love to do this, I'd love to be able to play a musical instrument. I used to when I was a kid. I haven't done it in a long time. It'd be cool to be able to like reconnect with music. It'd be cool to reconnect with speaking a foreign language. I used to be able to do that when I was a kid. Can't do it anymore. That'd be a fun skill to reconnect with. And we all know what brainstorming is. That's when you're just like firing out everything. Is that what it looks like? You're just sort of like capturing every idea and then winnowing down, or are you editing on the fly?
Well, let's see. I would say it again, it depends. Like the whole family thing, it's tough, because really think of that as a getting ready for a fun work session type meeting, right? Where it has two facilitators, Kate and myself, right? And we've done a lot of prep ahead of time. And so work like you've described, doing a lot of brainstorming, looking back at the year, thinking about what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to have a lot more of in our lives, what do we want to have less of, what are we super thankful for, that kind of thing. That and there's a few different tools, techniques, and books. Like we'll we actually we have the you could have the you could describe it in a similar sort of progression or a bundle of activities that both Kate and I do. But what it looks like with the whole family is a bit of a brainstorm and talking about just what do you want to like looking back at the year, what are some things like you would want to build upon next year? Do we want to what sort of vacation do we think we're working toward this next year? And we probably have a pretty good idea of that. Is this like a year where, it's going to be a tighter budget, or maybe we've saved up and we're able to do, like a cool, a little bit bigger trip or whatever. We talk about these sort of big things to look forward to, but especially related to what kind of experiences do you want to have? So what would you like to do? And whatever comes out. And honestly, that large Post-it note, it isn't like every single idea that was generated. We typically will have like, maybe we have like a rough draft one, or we'll do small sticky notes or whatever, and then get ideas out and then see what is most important. And sometimes like last year, we didn't actually get through it all in one night. Then we sort of were able to revisit it and then just like a generative, like a flaring and focus sort of meeting exercise, right? Brainstorming, but then you sort of cluster and group and theme, and then pick like which would be more important. If you could do only one of these, which one would you do? And we'd sort of talk it through, and then out comes a small list.
Okay, so you are doing
especially
a little bit of
for the kids, right? Because we do not want their list to be we want their list to be approachable, relatable, and concise, to not be daunting. I mean, that's honestly the last thing I would want as an outcome of this, to be saying, yeah, I would like to not be intentional anymore. Capturing goals is scary, intimidating, and disappointing, and that kind of stuff. And I do think that that's true for a lot of people.
I'm curious, if you don't have to necessarily speak about your family planning sessions, you can talk about like with your family or by yourself. I'm curious as to how you get to, when you start talking about planning goals. I got a goal for you, Rob. I want next year for me to be a successful comic book artist.
Okay.
There we go. I wrote it down on the pad. I'm done. Dusting my hands off. I'm curious how you winnow down beyond that, because like that, there's the first thought that comes to mind. I just want to be successful. That's all. What does the interview look like in your head when you're trying to get from like the very vague to the very specific and concise?
It helps if you've done this more than once, right? So, and having some willingness to have things not go exactly how you expected, right? So let's say, you do capture that. You're just, okay, this is where I'm starting. I'm sold. I'm putting goals down on paper, whatever. And I'm going to keep it somewhere where I can see it. And I put this big thing down. That's like this granularity that, in any year you've experienced so far in your life, have you been able to bring about one singular goal of that size? So you can think about, we're talking about roughly the timeline of a year. So what's cool is you might be talking about maybe a couple of years or something like that, or maybe even 5. I used to be really into like 5-year planning and whatnot, but I'm terrible at it. I'm utterly, I know I'm not psychic because I've never predicted an accurate trajectory from, point A to point B on a 5-year granularity. Totally stink at it. So, but what I have noticed is that those goals have this influence on things that come, like what actions can I take? How can I set myself up to be in a position to have that outcome exist? And do I like those things that I would need to do to bring that about? How does that work when I have this big professional goal, but I also have these other personal goals as far as friendships and community and significant other relationship and all that stuff? Do I think I have the capacity to make progress that works? Or, maybe I think it's risky, but I'm okay with that. And it's not totally cavalier and silly, but I know it's going to be really difficult. And I'm going to capture that too. But still knowing the difficulty and maybe that I can't predict when I can make this come about, but I'm pretty sure if I move toward it, I'll be able to chip away at bringing this about.
Okay, but how do you know what to chip away at? Like I said, I'm a successful comic book artist, or I want to be a successful comic book artist. Yeah. How do I start chipping when I don't even know where to begin to get to that big vague statement? Like, how do you winnow down?
If you don't know where to begin, there's something that brought this into your mind. Like, why do you desire this, right? So you can start to ask why this and what is this? What do I mean? And try to get more specific too. Like, so if you have the desire to, like, what does crossing a threshold of success mean? And I think a couple of ways to define that would mean, is it a one-time thing or is it a recurring thing? And is it like successful comic artist means I'm recognized at events? Or is it a particular financial goal? Is it, what is it? Is it a project that you really believe in, that thing reaching its audience? That's the definition. What does it mean? What does that success mean? And then you'll have a with enough specificity, but probably not overly prescriptive specific, but honestly depends on your interest and your goals. Like, how specific do you need to get to be useful to move forward on it?
And, a conversation we've had on the show that I found to be extremely helpful in how I think about this stuff, and in it wound up helping in my workshops, was that example you used of the school teacher who was walking through the procedure of making a peanut butter sandwich.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Could you describe this? I mean, it's your story.
Okay, well, I think I've shared this, and I know that I'm not the only one. I think people have used this for creative writing and whatnot, but for me, it was I was in a group of kids who were being taught computer programming, and it's like, we're going to learn computers. Was this was the whole thing? Let's go to this room off this little lab off the side of the library, and then there was this person who I think was a volunteer that said, all right, we're going to learn how to, program computers. It's this language called BASIC. And first, before we begin, you're going to program me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And we're all like, what? And, that's not a computer and all this. And he's like, no, like just tell me what to do. This is like what you're going to do with computers. We're like, okay. Put the peanut butter on the bread. We're like, what? That's all. And he goes, all right. He grabs the jar of peanut butter, smacks it onto the loaf of bread. Boom. And he stops moving. And we're like, what? No, that's not what we meant. And then he's, we're laughing and stuff. And then we're like, well, take the bread out of the package. And he just, opens up the package in a sloppy way, and he dumps the bread out on the desk. And we're like, what? And just every single thing. We're like, oh wait, we need to be specific. And he helped us learn that we need to be, the computer does exactly what you tell it to do. And I think, what the sort of parallel are you drawing on here as far as, is it like being specific? And
well, so so I wound up borrowing that in that technique when Ann and I were leading our Rockets workshops during the Science Comics Rockets tour. And because the workshop we led was making a nonfiction mini comic. And one of the things we had to try to get the students to understand is that when you are making an instructional comic, you have to explain this concept as if the reader has never heard of it. So let's say your topic is 5 reasons why Hufflepuffs are the best house in Harry Potter. Well, we got to know what a Harry Potter is. We got to know what a house is. We got to know what a Hufflepuff is and related to everything else. Right? We can't just say Hufflepuffs are cool because they're stalwart and loyal. Well, that means nothing if I don't know anything about Harry Potter. So we use that example to say, this is how you think about describing a concept to somebody who has no idea about what the concept is. And it's been helpful to me when I think about goal planning as I want to be a successful comic book artist. Well, how would I explain that to somebody who doesn't know what a comic book is, who doesn't know what success looks like in the comic book industry, right? Like winnowing it down to that kind of level of specificity to explain it to a robot, to explain it to like Data just walked off of the Starship Enterprise, and you have to explain to this guy what your goal is, right? Somebody who is absolutely literal thinking.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's a way, I mean, that is so helpful in the end where what I try to do is get my goals down so they're clear enough when summarized on this large sticky note, which you divide that into like 4 or 5 sections and you put a little title on up above. It's not exactly infinite real estate. Like you need to state things clearly and briefly. And then when you have a bunch of categories and all this stuff, like I tend to maybe put too many words in my section, but I try to use that as a constraint to be brief. But your framing of it is I like that. I think that would be really helpful. Like if you have a goal, can you state it in such a way that someone who really didn't understand that space was able to get it?
And I would argue that anybody who's pursuing the creative paths that that you and I follow, whether it's video game design or comics, clarity is like the name of the game. So this is something you're already thinking about all the time anyway. Like a good comics page should be absolutely dead simple to read, and a video game interface should be invisible to the user, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly it's helping. It's a tool, and it's meant to serve serve you as a reference, and somehow on not just and probably not just disappear from you lock it in a vault and visit it 1 year later. There's some kind of there's a progression of activity after that. It's a moment in time that you've thought about enough where it's probably pretty robust, where it's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change noticeably in a week, probably. But over the course of that year, you may see like there's this sort of how it was influential, but but you ended up little by little, making different choices because you're not a robot.
Do you mind if I mention some planning systems that are being mentioned in the chat?
No, yeah. What's going on?
So Carrie Goebel-Billick is in the chat, Mushin Girl, a longtime friend of the show, and she's mentioning Flawless Execution, which is by James Murphy. It's a system put together by former fighter pilots based on their mission prep in the Air Force. I like that this is the website I found for it at any rate, and it says complexity meets simplicity. FE is usually a group effort planning session, but it can be adapted easily enough. It's more about drilling down focused brainstorming, and I particularly like what FE calls red teaming a plan. Poke as many holes in it as you can find, then go back and adjust the plan to account for as many pitfalls as you can foresee. None of us are fortune tellers, but if we examine the goal and look at any kind of frictions that we may encounter that would naturally rise up as we think about when this thing hits the road, right?
That reminds me of, so in a way, it's not that you're trying to that only gathering some clear expression of your intentionality. It's not like you're spell casting and out comes, time progressions and magically you weave together this thing that you wanted to bring about. But it's because it has to like that method, the flawless execution. So for somehow it just reminded me of the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act feedback loop. That is it. I heard of it as, I don't know, someone mentioned it in a presentation for years ago, and they said it was used by like fighter pilots, and that's not really planning for a year, right? But there is a feedback loop there that seems helpful to inform making choices. And so if your intentions are this reference point where you're, now you're acting out your or you're creating your goals as like this sort of map you want to cover throughout the year. And if you have this ability to check in, you have some kind of cycle and process that's it's like you can observe, like, what's my current situation, orient, and it's like, how does this fit with my map of priorities and where I want to go and whatever. And then you make decisions and keep rolling. But I think it's I think, like, are there any of these methods that, like you mentioned, David Say, right? That I think he has a pretty interesting one.
Right. Yeah. Let me pull
process.
up. Yeah, I'll pull up you're talking about the ETP, right? Which we've mentioned.
Well, the ETP, and also, I guess you would, honestly, that's I would say the combination of the ETP and the Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Right? Where you have the sort of different granularities being managed in parallel.
So yes, the ETP is sort of like the tactical day-to-day sort of evaluation of what you want to do. And so this is like as granular as it gets. What are you going to do today? But then the Groundhog Day resolutions reflection system that he's developed, for the past 10 years, I think, is monthly. It's like you do like you start out in February 2nd is when you begin, and then you check in every month. So then March 3rd, April 4th, May 5th, throughout the entire year, and just checking once a month to review what you've done. And you can go to davidsay.com to see his ongoing exploration of that. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things. Honestly, you're trying to look for a relatable system that you can use and feel good executing, right? So just taking a quick scan of flawless execution looks like a pretty cool model. And if you find a model that's comfortable and usable, I think that's what's really handy. Where that like functionally you are trying to get a system of intention and ongoing action that brings you closer to where you intended to go, right? And you need some kind of support structure for that. And I think that's one thing where in sort of I guess in our topic for this episode, thinking of like a gearing up approach, if you have one of those things, it's probably a helpful asset. Or if you have something that just is functionally similar to that, like you've got some that are really I mean they're part of the materials of like a business consultancy. Like you'll encounter these a lot. Like I remember one I encountered earlier in my career called the Catalyst Design Methodology. No, the Catalyst Design Methodology, and that helped with analyzing problems for business. And I found a lot of parallels with this, where I'm like, holy moly, I can analyze my own problems with this. This is neat. Fantastic. That's finding some kind of sets of tools to practice that. I think you can find them all over, and I would include the emergent task planner as like the tactical aspect of an ongoing thoughtful system of getting to where you want to go, combined with which I've never emulated myself, but have always enjoyed just seeing how Dave unpacks and plans and then starts to check in, right? So honestly, in a way, it's like, to me, that's like it's a fairly minimalist system. It's just, but it's rigorous in like the accountability, right? Where whatever's going on, however well it's going on, however great or poorly, Dave is he's gonna dig through it. He's gonna unpack it and check in. So
Yeah.
essentially, yeah, at first, February 2nd, and then March 3rd, April 4th, May 5th, etc. And that's and that check-in, you can then say, well, this is the feedback loop. What am I going to do now? Like, am I going to how are you going to act on how am I going to act on this? I'm going exactly where I wanted to go, but I don't like it. I'm going, or you can, things are, as you're executing and working toward what you're trying to bring about, you can't help but you're in a new circumstance, and that's going to be that's a chance to look at it, compare, decide. Yeah.
Well, and Nate Marcel is in the chat, and he's mentioning bullet journaling, which you have done. I actually do a variation on it. I've actually combined my ETP with a little bit of the bullet journaling system, sort of made it my own to match my needs. But let's see if we can describe this succinctly. Basically, the idea is it's like task planning, like assembling your tasks for the day or for the session. And then there's different bullet symbols you put next to the things, whether they're in progress, which I believe is a circle. X is done. And then arrow is shifted to the next day, if I remember right. Does that sound right, Rob?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think my experimentation with bullet journaling has been a loose, hand-wavy interpretation.
Well, what I like about it is that it's an analog way. Analog. It's on paper. Analog is a funny word. It's on paper, but it is a way to create statuses for the different things that you're doing. Right? Oh, Rob, you're pulling up yours.
As far as bullet journaling, like I was doing this earlier in the year, right? And
okay.
And so I can't remember what this kind of journaling is called. Is this bullet journaling?
No, that's not what I was looking at. I've got it
Okay.
up on the screen right here. Can you see this? It's actually got like an example right there on the screen, where you have like these four different items, and then there's like different symbols next to each of them. And so it's like a bullet list, but the bullets are all different symbols to indicate different statuses of the process. And so it's a nice simple way to like sort of track what you're doing. And Nate's saying that he's with you. He Frankenstein. He has his own Frankenstein way of doing this. And I myself have my own way of doing it, where I basically resorted to just a circle, an X, and an arrow, and those are the only ones I use. So let's see if I can find something that I worked on earlier this year. I don't know if this is even showing up, but like we have like Baron von Bear inks for the last Inktober on October 31st or whatever. And then we have underneath that an Amazon Academy page, which I started but didn't finish, right? So there's the symbol. It's got like a circle to indicate this was begun on this day, but it was not finished on this day, right? But then I incorporate it with David Say's ETP, in that I have the timeline of when I worked on what. And then I also work with a color-coded system where each color refers to a different kind of task. So purple indicates personal comics work, red indicates teaching work, pink is for what's it called? Pink is personal, like just personal life. Like, if I'm going to the gym, that's going to be rendered in pink. Purple is for comics work. Green is for like paid comics work because of money. Anyway,
quick question: in your goal planning, is there a similar approach as far as those color codes, if you will? Like, so do you have things you want to bring about related to each of those colors?
Oh, yes, certainly. Yes. Okay. I want them to be more balanced across the board. I want equal amounts of red and green. Red is teaching work, green is comics work. Actually, I would like it when I'm flipping through my ETP, if the green was a little bit more than the red. I'd like to be making more comics than teaching, but I still love teaching, right? And I would like the purple to eventually become green. So like whatever I'm working on, the purple stuff will get published and therefore become the paying work. So, but But then another thing that Nate mentioned is like having like a sloppy journal just for like capturing random thoughts. And this is where I thought we could talk a little bit about where index cards come into your life, Rob. We've talked about this
Yeah.
before, but something that you turned me on to, and I have this in my bag, in my everyday carry bag all the time, is a little note card wallet for capturing ideas with. And this is a really neat one. Is this? Yeah, this is a Right in the Rain all weather index card wallet, and you
Oh,
can keep index cards in it, and then it has like a little pen loop, and it's waterproof.
wow,
Um,
that's a
you
nice one.
you have a similar one though, right, Rob? Because I mean, and this is the funny thing. Anybody, if you could see like Rob's video while I'm talking, often while we're just having a casual conversation, like during extra leans or when we're doing the show, when we're just chatting and catching up, I'll see him look down like this, and his hand will be moving because he's always capturing notes. So I'm wondering, um, if you could talk a little bit about like how index cards figure in. And Nate's asking if that's from GTD, Getting Things Done with David Allen.
Not like in a, so is it from Getting Things Done? It's from when I worked at Burger King as a teenager, and
Really?
I would write on anything. Anything. Like so the back of placemats, like, so you're you know, you have this stack of trays, you know, clean, and you're like, you slip this paper that probably has a bunch of advertising on the front of it, right? But on the back of it, it's a big blank sheet of paper. um, I would write notes in a very unstructured way across all sorts of that space, and then fold it up and cram it in my pocket. And then sometimes I would be like, "Hey, wait a minute! That roll of tape is going to get thrown out from the register. I'm going to write on that." So, and then I'd have a ball of that in my pocket, and then, and so this habit of capturing has been very long term for me, and then how I relate to it. So eventually that led to carrying a full size notebook, and then I switched to a Franklin Day planner, and then I switched back to a smaller notebook, and then I went to Moleskine, little pocket Moleskine, and then uh, eventually I was like, this Moleskine is frustrating because I wrote things in a different order than I want them to be now, and
Hmm.
then I switched to note cards. So that's the
And then
progression.
and the neat thing about these, the to do I guess like a little addies. Here's the one that I have. It actually has like it's the size of a wallet,
Mhm.
and then it's got this hard back here where you can put your note card. So you have like a blank note card for always capturing ideas, and then you open it up and you keep a pack of note cards in the middle. And then I have my Fisher Space Pen here, which can write underwater and upside down.
Mm.
So if an idea ever happens, or if I'm in an interesting conversation with somebody, capture the idea on the note card. But you've taken it to the next level, Rob.
Okay. So what I have different kinds of notes that I capture. So sometimes it's like my buffer of stuff where it's like I want to do a fresh list of what do I want to get done today, and it's a fairly disposable note card, but it's like things from my OmniFocus and other stuff that I think of as far as intentions for the day, and that it lets me filter and prioritize and you know, do some kind of drawing or doodle or whatever. And I'm like, this is something I can refer to in my back pocket throughout the day. But then I go to meetings, or I facilitate stuff or whatever, and things happen, or I'm on a podcast, or I'm about to podcast, or I'm about to go to a meeting. Note cards are always there to for me to think, what am I about to do next, or what just happened that I want to recall. And then I typically, you know, I I filter, bundle, group them, and then typically, not always, but scan them in, and then they're in Evernote, and I'll reflect on them about once a week, every other week or so, and do a little bit of tagging and titling, which helps me with finding them. Because yes, Evernote does handwriting recognition, but it's not, you know, not super accurate. It's better than nothing. But so what that means is this combination of being able to go between different projects without having to keep it all in my head all day, and then so I can sort of fill up my buffer or whatnot with what I'm about to do next, and then experience that, get some things down, and stuff that I think would be, useful to remember or act on, or just just even just what happened. I don't even know if it would be useful, but it's note card. So I typically don't capture. I don't even try to capture everything that's going on, but things that stand out, and especially sort of actions and things to commit to. And I know people have super detailed methods for that, but in a way, it's kind of like always being in some kind of, or frequently being in sort of a journalist mode as stuff is washing over me, and then
And you
it's
should.
there. It's a resource.
I'm hoping you can clarify when you say scan. You're not talking about putting them on a flatbed scanner, opening up Scan Pro or whatever software, and like doing a preview scan, scanning it, saving it as a JPEG into a folder. You have a kind of a more streamlined system than that.
I do, and what's funny, it recently has had a monkey wrench thrown into it. It's I use the what is it? Fujitsu ScanSnap IX500, and the up until a couple weeks ago, it would scan a stack of note cards, turn that into a PDF. That is very true, and then it would actually instantly add it to Evernote. That was awesome. And it doesn't do that anymore. And so I'm working on trying to repair that and come up with a Python script to make this work. But I just haven't quite squeezed the time in to finish that. So, because right now it sees the note cards as receipts for some reason, is like, okay, I'll save a separate file, and sometimes I'll turn them sideways because it's a receipt, right? And it's not at all. So that's a puzzle.
Look at me making your life easier for you. Isn't that great that I helped you?
Completely broke the whole reason I bought it. This one little software update. So yeah, I'll be able to fix that, but it's going to take a little bit of effort.
What a drag.
Yeah, but it is a nice system. And honestly, having bumps like that, it is an interesting time to be able to reevaluate, like, what has been useful about this and what can I do to remake this pattern in a better way. So, and I'm revisiting. So there's a time before I had this scanner, and so only the most valuable stacks of note cards would make it into Evernote. And what I would do is I would prop up my cell phone camera, and then I have that stack of note cards in a situation where I could you can get little like stands to put note cards in, and like as if like you're referring to a recipe on a counter or whatever. And so I would just stack the note cards in and then flip them, take a picture, flip, take a picture, flip, like manually do this, right? And you can see some examples. Like I think I did a blog post unpacking thoughts about what I think design is or something, and it's totally using that approach. And that's an old article on my blog at interactive-storyteller.com. And I think it's called Thoughts About Design. Yeah. Anyway, so it seems like the note card thing, you're like, there's something,
I just like the idea of like formal data capturing, like in terms of bullet journaling, ETP. There's like a tactical thing on the ground. This is what I'm using every day to keep myself organized, and sort of like doing a day by day whittling towards my goals. And then it also becomes a trail of data that you leave for reviewing at the end of the year when you want to look at new goals and building on what successes you've had. But then there's this messy way of capturing stuff like in the moment. And what I like about your system is that it's very flexible and adaptable to a variety of situations, right? I used to think that all my sketchbooks had to be themed, and my sketchbooks had to be, okay, this is my sketchbook for this project, this is my sketchbook for that project. And finally, I just like gave up on it, because the sketchbook you have on you is the one you should be using, right? And I have one on me, and it's my working sketchbook for everything, right? But then there's still that problem of, well, they're still in these discrete books. And I like what you've done, the solution of like, well, I can organize the information later using Evernote or whatever system that you want to use.
Well, yeah, and critically, it's a stack of cards you can sort any way
Yep.
you want.
Yeah,
So
I like that a lot.
you can quickly draw a
yeah.
title card, and all of a sudden there's a theme stack. So to finish the thought, as far as a workaround is, now I carry like a assorted little set of them clipped together in a few different ways. This is kind of hipster PDA-ish, not really, but
Hipster PDA being taking a stack of note cards and using a binder clip to hold them together. And it was coined by Merlin Mann.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, where I would have it's almost like I'm carrying around like the most important, 1.5 inch of those note cards, but grouped in various ways and then clipped with a larger clip. Bundled with small clips, clipped with a larger clip, and then and it's like it's like an analog small Evernote buffer that I carry with me. And then I'm at some point going to probably get that scanner problem fixed.
But what you're talking about there, and I'm hoping you use this as a bridge to the next section, because we got to take a break. We're a little overdue for that. Yeah. I want to talk about, what does that planning session look like? Because we're talking about introducing another task in sorting the information that you've amassed and collected over the week, right? So what does a planning session look like? What does it look like for me? What does it look like for you? And I would love it for the leaners in the chat, if you could take a minute and a half to collect your thoughts on this. What does a planning session look like for you? How dutiful are you to it? Is it a monthly thing? Is it a weekly thing? And how long do you spend on it? And what kinds of conversations do you have with yourself when you have your weekly planning session or monthly planning session, however often you do it? But before we dive into that, we've got to thank some people who make this show possible. And those people are the folks who support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. It's a way for you to say, I believe in Rob and Jerzy and what they do, and I want to make sure that it's sustainable, and I want to support them. So here's $1 a month or whatever you can afford. I want to thank 5 people who have been doing exactly that. First up, Mark Falk. Mark, thank you for believing in us and what we do. You can find Mark on Twitter at Radomir. And then thank you to the Mysterious K. We don't know who you are, but we appreciate that you appreciate us. So thank you, Kay, for making the show possible. And also the Metal Witch Sketchbook Project. Also, we don't know what your name is, but we know what your project is called. And thank you so much for supporting us and believing in us. Metal Witch Sketchbook Project. Also, Gail Bushman. You can find Gail on Facebook at Nightingale Art to see Gail's work. And finally, Ashley Knapp, longtime friend of the show. Thank you, Ashley, for supporting us for so long. And you can find Ashley on Twitter at Control-Alt-Lee, CTR-Alt-Lee. And you can join them at patreon.com/leanintoart, where you will find all the shows we produce, as well as the Extra Leans, the shows we record only for people who support us on Patreon. There's a post right there. Extra Lean, episode 127, Snackable Performance. And that's where Rob and I just riff live, and then those posts become an open mic post where you can talk about whatever you want with fellow leaners. And we thank everybody who has been supporting us at patreon.com/leanintoart. It means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
All right, time for some more music. All right, are you ready to get pumped again?
Maybe.
There we go. A little stimage, Metroid Metal.
Nice.
From the Metroid Metal soundtrack. Okay, second half of the show, second part of the show. What does a planning session look like for you, Rob?
I think it looks like, in a way, a visit to my own trail of data, like a library. And I have, a variety of sources. I think a lot of us naturally have a trail of data that we can peruse. I think two really strong ones would be your calendar and your photos you took for the year. It's, if you're someone that especially does photos as work in progress things, or capturing your process and all that, your photos are going to have some good stuff. And at the very least, like moments you thought were worth capturing. And that's going to, I think, reinforce your reflection, make it easier to look back. But yeah. So, but for me, it also looks like looking at my Evernote and looking at my journal in day one. Um, those are pretty strong sources. A couple of years ago, it's been, well, I guess 3 years ago. No, let's see, 2016. So yeah, I mean, it's will be almost 3 years. It's 3 years very soon, where I did the experience inventory project, and that's it's similar. Like my process is similar to that. That the experience inventory project was a little more robust than that. I came up with my own self interview that that helped me almost like sort of reform us the like what happened in this past year, and then where was it, how do I feel about it, as far as the was this something difficult, was it do I what's my sentiment, do I feel really negative or positive about it, and then how did it integrate with others, like did it help anyone, or did it get any reactions, and stuff like that. Um, yeah, and so anyway, so I like to, even like before I did this experiment with the experience inventory, my process looked similar, but this was just sort of turning it into a little more of a research project, and a little more structured. Um, but a lot of it, like that, the beginning is tons. It's research, right? That's what it looks like in the beginning. Um,
You're talking about your annual one?
yeah.
Okay. What about like the more tactical on the ground, like weekly or monthly? Do you do like a
Oh,
self
yeah.
meeting on a regular basis? Like how often do you do it?
Yeah, so I made this so I have what do you call this, a Circo notebook, that if you have this their little, oh, it's kind of like a special paper punch that makes these little things on the sides of paper, and then you can easily put them into this notebook and pop them out.
Okay.
And so I created some templates, like that there's two key things that work in a pair. One of them is the prior week review, and then there's the looking at the week ahead. And the looking at a week ahead, um, it, I have some projects that are pretty consistent and ongoing, so they get their you know they're filled in, but I have some blank spots too, and I have it essentially uh, what am I trying to do for my main gig, and then my home and side gig roles. And then but that's as far as the week ahead. And then but the week review, I just think of it's very much like your like a common collaborative team retrospective format, where you think about, like, well, what went well, and what didn't go well, and then high fives, like who do you want to tell them, like, oh gosh, you're awesome, thank you for your helping me out with this, or I learned something from you. And then joy and gratitude, just, it's kind of redundant with the high fives, but I don't know, just
Mm, I don't
yeah.
know. I think there's a distinction there in that, like high fives, I would define as things that I'm giving myself credit for. Look at, you showed up, you did this thing, you know, even when you didn't feel good. Whatever you do, it's a task that I completed. Whereas gratitude is like, I'm grateful that these conditions exist, whether or not I had a direct influence on them.
Ah, oh, interesting, nice, okay.
That's how I think about those two words. At any rate,
Okay,
I I,
yeah, I could see that being a useful distinction. So yeah, what is
I
your so you're talking tactical, I guess, and yeah, what does that look like?
sure. So, well, just yeah, because we were talking about like when you described like, oh, I've got all these note cards, and then I scan them into Evernote, and then I, once every so often I go ahead and I organize and tag them, and I can see younger Jersey, who thought that making comics was just eating Frankenberry and drawing all the time, rolling his eyes at what you just said, right? Like, gosh,
Oh,
that sounds a lot like a lot of work for something that I may or may not use, right? But I have come to rely on my weekly meeting. Every Sunday, I have at least a half hour meeting with myself. And I sit down and I look at what I did last week versus, so I do like a week in review. What did I do? What did I set out to do? What did I do? How successful was it? Charting the highs and lows. And I'll
mm,
show how I capture all that in a minute. And then I sit down and I plan the next week partially in response to that, partially in response to what I've already set out to do via what's on my calendar, what I've already agreed to do, what I'm under contract to do, but then also like, is there anything left over from last week? Is there anything I need to adjust from the way last week went? So what I do is at the start of every week in my ETP, I've got a page, and credit all goes to Anne on this. She's the one who taught me to do this, and it's been super, super helpful. So via my color coding system, I go, okay, well, what classes do I have to teach this week? What podcasting or videos am I going to do this week? What personal comics work am I going to do this week? What money comics am I going to do this week? What personal activities do I have scheduled? And do I have anything to do for A2CAF, that comics festival that I co-organize, right? And then so this is the first page I draw or write out during my planning session. And once that week is completed, the first thing I look at the following week is I look at what got done on here. And then day to day, I have a section. So your sort of week in review of like high fives, gratitude, I just have in a singular bucket, a very simple bucket of what good happened.
Oh, that's a good bucket.
So
literally, and yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and it's just like anything good. Like, did I do something good? Did something good happen to me? And this bucket can be something where I'm reflecting on something that happened in my classroom. This student said something really funny or really clever or insightful, and I want to hang on to that thought. Dan Michigan said something really funny when we were having a meeting about Amazon Academy. Or, hey, I did a page in 4 hours. I'm really happy about that. That kind of thing. Anything that qualifies under this made me feel good about today gets captured in the what good happened bucket. And so, like, when I'm doing the week review, I first look at, okay, here's what my plan was last Sunday. What got done? How do I feel about things on each day? Okay, now we're ready. Let's do the what needs to get done page for this coming week.
Is there a feedback? Does that tie back to your like big goals for the year? Like, so and is that like on a every week basis? If so, or is it sort of like there's special weeks?
It's on an every week basis, and then end of the year, I'll pull out all my ETPs for the year. I usually fill about 2 of these a year, and then I'll flip through. And as I'm thinking about next year, like where do the capacities fall apart, and how can I plan for that in the future? How can I make more room for the things that I want to do? So I have a more realistic sense of what time I have.
So that because I what's funny is I actually have a page in that little my little planner that I don't have a name for it. It's this little circle planner that I made these little self-interview templates, but for the different frequencies. So I've got a weekly / monthly, a frequently, which what is that? Daily and whenever. So I've got 3 buckets that are like, I don't know. I want to get to these sometimes, and they are all process that I can use to help with planning. So like the weekly monthly is the most stable bucket. But the other ones are helpful. And it's like, I don't want to forget. Like, so for an example of the weekly / monthly is do a review of the week ahead, plan, or do a review of the week past, plan the week ahead. That's what, we just talked about. And then, and there's just helpful questions and prompts where it's like some days and I'm not feeling up to this or feeling ready, or I feel rushed or harried. And I'm like, having this little reference I find helpful. So, and then a reminder here, every month, review my goals in detail, decide how I feel about them now, any changes needed, and what goals need extra attention in the coming month. And then, so there's this little, so also clamped in, I have a few different reinforcing feedback loop mechanisms in my little circle planner. I have this is my mini printout of my goals for the year, right? Rob's goal.
Oh, that's nice.
And then this takes different forms, but it's kind of like this is a pamphlet, which I will, then make annotations throughout the year. It takes different forms. Sometimes it's shorter and it's like straight up goals. And other times, like this year, I felt like I wanted to just reminders of positive reinforcing things, like different quotes that I found really helpful, different questions that I thought would be interesting and useful. That like for instance, two questions I put on this. There's different sections. So I've got Rob's goal planning, and then I've got a section called what do I see the world is asking of me? Okay. And then I have my 2018 words, another part of my goal, my process, right? I pick, theoretically, I should pick one word. I've never succeeded in that. So I pick a couple words. And I think that I've got a section called what do I stand for? I've got a section called goals arranged by category with intention, why, and how. And then I've got different buckets. I've got family, communities, holistic fitness, professional commitments. And then I've got this section called approach to working the goals, day-to-day, week, and month. And then so this handy reminder of like what I'm like this process. Honestly, this page is more or less what we've been like my side of the conversation for this podcast. I probably should have been looking at it more.
What I love about this is like you've written sort of a manual for navigating the next year, and you have like the AAA, road manual in your planner that is there for handy reference at any given point.
I like that. Yeah, it is a manual in a way.
But it's not set in stone. It's you can update it and you can make amendments to it, right?
And that's part of the ongoing review process aspect of it too. And another categories or another section is called helpful insights, inspirations, questions to keep in mind along the way. And that's the final section. Yeah, that gets clamped in.
Yeah. And again, like that's more of like a troubleshooting guide for am I stuck, right? Something I do when I'm teaching Clip Studio Paint in my comics classes is that I write out on the board, like, because like when you're managing 12 kids with computers and like one of them can't continue drawing until they figure out what's going wrong. I had to come up with, okay, here's the 4 questions to ask before you raise your hand, right? What tool am I using? What layer am I on? What was the other part? Well, what ink color do I have? I forget like I forget the full list, but it was like, here's like the 4 common things that I find myself helping students with over and over and over again. So ask yourself these 4 questions before you ask me a question. And it's not to like let myself off the hook. It's more to manage when you have that many kids at once. But like, I like this idea of you having a page in your manual for, it's like, okay, here are the things to watch out for. Here are the things to ask yourself if you get stuck or if you feel frustrated, or if you're feeling big feelings throughout the year, right?
Exactly, because when I'm not feeling ready, I prepared myself to be ready to keep going. That's what that's for. And so when I have this thing on this page though, of the helpful planning notes page, right, where it's weekly, monthly, frequently, whenever, and daily, that the thing that says every month review my goals in detail, decide how I feel about them, and make changes, whatever. This is how I can do that easily. I can act on it. And because having goals that, let's see, it's hard enough to make progress toward goals, but having some kind of that feedback loop, that mechanism that helps you make progress. If I can't get a handle on that, and it puts me even farther from getting putting myself in a position to work on the goals. So I don't want to make this process hard and inaccessible and whatever, even though one could make a strong case that it's, maybe there's a lot of stuff to it.
It's fussy. That's one of my favorite words to use, just to mean like, it means that I care about this a lot, and maybe I've thought about it a little bit too hard, but
no such thing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, let's look at the chat and see what some of the planning methods that some of the leaners are using. So Carrie's in there. Mushin Girl says, my plan is constantly evolving. I make it a point to formally revisit each month to look at what time I will have available and what to tackle. I use both sketch pads and an iPad using a planner app to chunk my time and journal my production. I'm constantly looking for where I can tweak to maximize my time. Yay, day job. Yes. Uh, I think like this is. I want to empathize and commiserate with you, Carrie, in that it's like cartooning and teaching is like my full-time gig, but like it's so hard even then to manage like, okay, I'm getting a signal from this, I'm making money from this, I better invest more into that. Oh, but when I invest more into that, that's taking more time away from this other thing that is very personally satisfying to me that I'm not making any money at yet. Right? I think we talked about this very recently. Is like this idea of like once you start getting some momentum on one thing, then it becomes extra challenging because like, well, how do I get momentum going for the other things to keep new stuff being generated? Um, it's almost like that pressure never goes away, right?
Not so far for me.
Yeah.
I mean, how I relate to it, I've definitely worked at how I relate to it, and honestly, it's a lot of what we've been talking about this whole episode. Um, the yeah, finding whew, the like how I relate to that ongoing effort management challenge, big feelings, ups and downs, what have you. It's that's one of the reasons why it can seem a little bit fussy and silly, all these different aspects. But like again, this is like my recipe that helps me be in a position to feel confident that I can act, and then see the evidence of what I've done and those choices, and have and just have a little machine that's a feedback loop that lets me fine tune and evolve and whatever. But other things in like support mechanisms and little doodads I've added to the process, like the words, and then turning the words into a talisman and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, that helps remind me. And
Uh, we talk a lot about totemic magic on this show, or at least
yeah.
maybe we've talked about it a lot personally. I'm a big fan of that idea. So like one of the things in my planning is so like every in my planning session, once I've written down, here's what I got to do all week. The next thing I do is I hand rule
Mm,
in this graph
mm,
notebook each day. So there's the day in the upper right, and then on the left hand side of the page, this column gets numbered per hour 9, 10, 11, 12. These are the hours of the day that I plan on
mm.
working. And then here are listed the what 5 or 6 tasks that I plan to take on with the what could happen bucket at the bottom. This is
That's
all
really
ruled by
efficient.
hand. It's ruled by hand, and the thing I used to rule it with is this He-Man playing card that I laminated to use as a ruler, so that while I'm ruling out each page with this card, I'm getting this reminder of like, okay, these are what your values are. You believe in being strong enough to be compassionate and to forgive yourself, but still do your best all the time. Like I'm thinking that as I very calmly and like, and we talked about this when David Say was on the show. There's something that is like resetting about like hand ruling the pages. Like I'm just it's very mechanical, and I can like sort of meditate on what, getting myself in that mindset of planning my week when I do that. Um,
I like that.
Nate Marcel in the chat is saying, I try and review all the stuff at least once a day. Keep about 3 books for different stuff, a habit tracker on my phone, and capture notes in my phone. I'm loving hearing this combination of, on paper and digital methods of highlighting that there's no magic bullet for this stuff, right? And
Oh,
it's a lot of
exactly. Right. I mean, I don't know. We could jump the shark by where we could prescribe one app and one book or whatever, or a book app combo. Um, yeah, I don't know. I have to believe if we ever did that, it would be so flexible. Who knows what, right? But where it's not yeah. Um, we're not zealous. Is it a zealous or a zealot? A zealot is zealous, right?
yes, a zealot
Okay,
is a zealous person,
zealot. Yeah, it's we're
and
not
you can tell
zealot.
because of their zealotry.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we're not zealous about the what form does this need to take, and it's and it's interesting. Like you think about the different jobs that the different forms naturally are stronger at, and phones can bug you and alert you. That can be a feature.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and yes, I like the idea of being playful with it and always looking for new ways to do it.
Mm.
Um, because our work is always growing and changing. We're always growing and changing. Naturally, you'd think that the stuff you use to maintain and support what you do would grow and change as well. Um, certain fundamentals will remain consistent and the same, but you know, the methodologies I think should always be updated. So are we getting close to final thought time?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, this is, you know, it's a big topic. I mean, like by doing this stuff, reminding ourselves of what we do, it's like we're, you know, I guess this is how I think we're getting there on the topic, right? I mean, reviewing the year and gearing up for planning. Yeah, this is.
So how about this? I'm going to make a proposition for what we do for the final thought is like really boil it down to a very, very simple framework of thinking about next year. Is how about we ask ourselves the questions of what are you looking to do more of and what would you like to do less of for 2019?
Okay. I like those. I like those questions. Those are handy.
I hope so. You wrote them.
Well,
I plucked those from the bushel basket that Rob collected today, everybody.
Well, what I'm trying to say is I like hearing my own thoughts. Let's just.
There we go.
All right.
Therein lies the lesson, everybody. Rob likes his own thinking. Well, that's good because it's pretty good thinking. So, all right, let's thank some other people who make this show possible. Let me adjust my headphones. And those people who make the show possible happen to be us. We make stuff, and in the making of the stuff, we think hard about it, and then we bring those thoughts to this show. And the thing that I hope you will check out right now, actually, I'm not going to say, this message is actually for the people who have already purchased Science Comics Rockets. Thank you, first of all, for purchasing the book. It makes me very happy to know that this book that I worked so hard on with my wife about the history and science of rockets, as told by the animals who participated in rocket history, met readers. People actually got it and read the book, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, a thing that I hope that you will do that will cost you nothing but a few moments of your time is to give it a review on Goodreads or Amazon to help more people find the book. And I know writing a review is like, I find it incredibly challenging because like you want to write something witty and pithy and insightful. I'll try to simplify it for you and just say, was there one story of animals in there that you really liked? Like I liked how I found out that tortoises orbited the moon before human astronauts. There you go. That's it. It's neat that story's in there. Jerzy makes great sound effect design. Who knew that bears were used in ejector seat technology? There's lots more facts like that in this book. A simple 2 sentences, something like that. You know, I feel kind of a little itchy begging for reviews, but that would be incredibly helpful to the book if more people reviewed it. Nate Marcel saying, bought rockets for my son, but didn't mention on the show because, He's... I shouldn't have read that out loud.
You've got a frog in your throat, Jerzy. That's funny. It reminds me of something else that we should.
It reminds me of tortoises orbiting the moon.
Yes.
So, well, you can take that review back, Nate. That's the peril of doing a live show. Thank you, Nate. Yes, I know. I'm so sorry. There's the Science Comic series. There's a lot of great books in the series as well. But for those who have purchased the book, it'd be wonderful if you did give it a review. Speaking of reviewing things,
it does make a difference. Those algorithms, all that stuff, it feeds like retail presences and whatnot, and they crawl upon each other. The different. Sorry, I'm laughing at the chat. Oh boy. So I know everyone. It's I don't know. It's so common and it feels so whatever to be like and subscribe and do reviews and stuff, but like, it really does make a difference. I mean, the like how content gets promoted and like there are feedback loops that happen. Like when someone thinks like, oh, there's a spark of interest here. Let's do a little bit of ad promotion or cross promotion, and you know buyers who got this may also like, and whatever, it feeds the data feeds the algorithms, and it makes a difference as far as what people see. So I think it's awesome that you mention it. And yeah, this is good. One of the things we practice is trying to market what we do, right? Welcome to this this whole commercial segment. So that just had extra layers to it, right? And then I can mention something that I made too, which it's this game called This Panda Needs You. It's a really mellow approachable game for all ages. It's one of the things that you could do yourself to wind down from a hectic day, or you could what its original intended audience was young ones and learning pattern matching and all that stuff. How do they do that? Well, there's this little cartoon stack of blocks and a panda that it's hanging out in a little bamboo forest with the blocks. It's all cool till a cloud comes along and knocks them all down. And well, it's your job to help put things right. So you stack the blocks, and the panda's like celebrating as you're making progress. The panda knows, the algorithm behind the panda knows. And it's a lot of fun. And there's like over 50 different levels that get progressively harder little by little. You're dealing with more blocks, different shapes, different colors, more complex patterns and stuff. And you can learn lots about it at this-panda.com, and it's available for all sorts of platforms, iPhones and Androids and Windows and Mac. So handy links again at this-panda.com.
And if you got it and you enjoyed it, please give it a review. That helps more people find it. If you are here because you like the way we think about stuff and aren't so interested in the stuff we make, fair enough. This show is a thing that we make, and you can find more things like that at leanintoart.com/workshops. They're self-contained videos that you can download at a price of your choosing, even free. You can get it for free. And if you do get some value out of it, a great thing you could do is come back and purchase it and get it for a friend. Then you're getting something nice for a friend, and then you're also giving us a tip for the thing that we made. And if you're watching the video on YouTube right now, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. And if you're listening to it in a podcatcher like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, giving it a review wherever you listen to it helps more people find the show as well. And we appreciate the fact that all of you have been doing exactly that. It means a lot to us. If I may share a story about having holiday presents spoiled for me. Did I ever tell the story when I found a stash of gifts that were meant for me when I was a little kid?
I don't know. Like I feel like we've chatted about it. Maybe not on
maybe
mic,
on Extra Lean.
What? Yeah. What?
When I was a little kid, I actually found like a stash of gifts that were meant for me and my brother. And I called my brother. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this! This is what we're getting for Christmas. And we're digging through. And we're like, oh, we're getting this. And then like minutes later, like the crushing thought dawned on me that I just wrecked Christmas for myself. Because like now I know, and like that feeling is like full on me now. Knowing that I spoiled a gift for somebody. Yes, that guilt's gonna ride strong for a long time. So Nate, I sent you a special message in the chat about that to make up for it. And yes, after that, I remember I like told my parents, I'm like, I don't ever want to find that. I won't look. But I never ever want to see ahead of time, because like I realize the thrill of anticipation is like part of the deal. It's part of what makes it such a good time.
Yeah, and that's not. I mean, that's not intuitive, right? I mean, the whole it just, it's easy to skip over that and be like, all right, it's the gift, woo, but yeah, that's I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I've leaked things from time to time where I feel like I'm really good at playing it cool and like maybe throwing up a smoke screen about like, I don't know what I'm going to get you or whatever, and stuff like that. And then I'll make it to the last week and then leave a receipt out or something, or you know what I mean, and just be like, oh, why did I do that? And then not really know if someone discovered what it was or not, and just be like, yeah, this the anticipation, the waiting, it's yeah, I don't know, mistakes happen.
All right, so final thought time. What are you looking to do more of? What would you like to do less of? Go.
Okay, I would like to do more playful, spontaneous things, both as in like family and friendships, and also just on my own, just random playful stuff. And I would also like to do more just random thinking about you type stuff with friends. I would like to do less less worrying about stuff that I really can't change. And that's a big one, but I don't, going into detail is, I don't care to right now. But I would like to, because that worry, honestly, I think it's natural and easy to do. Um, feeling anxious can be such a distraction, and so like, yeah, I would like to do less of that. Not that it's crushing or overly common, but it's there enough, right? Where I've been improving at that when it comes to like creative projects and commitments as far as different roles. But I like to get better at it still, because it's just wasted energy.
Mm.
Um, how about you? What would you like to do more of and less of?
Mm. I would like to do more developing new stuff next year. One thing I really enjoyed this year, I had so much fun working on that Baron von Bear project. Um,
Mm.
a lot more fun than I thought I would have. There was like I talked, I think, in recent episodes about how I had been waiting to do a story about this character for 16 years. Like the first time I drew him was like in 2002. That doesn't mean that I had everything figured out for the last 16 years. Um, it meant that I had this kernel of an idea that I felt like there was something interesting with, but I just didn't take the extra step to do anything more with it. And so when I finally did commit to doing that mini comic in October, there was this like point of this little stab of terror of like, oh well, now I'm actually going to do it, and it's almost worse that I've been waiting so long for it, because now I really feel like I need to deliver on it. Not that I think the audience for it is going to be sitting there waiting for something magnificent, but I am, right. I've built it up over all this time, um, but crossing that threshold and developing something that I feel like was interesting and fun to do. I'd like to have space for more of that kind of thing. And what I mean specifically is like developing pitches, right? Like maybe not doing full mini comics, but doing like 10 pages of this, that, and the other, so that I have some sample materials that I can start shopping around next year. And in order to accommodate that, one thing I'd like to do less of is jumping at opportunities to try to keep the lights on. Um, have a little bit more faith that I can maybe simplify my living and get by on less, so that I can have more space for product development. We'll see.
Mm.
I'll do my best to make that happen.
Mm,
But
mm, mm.
that's what the where the planning will come in, right? And that's where I think having a manual like you have at the head of my ETP would be a good reminder to help me navigate the question of like, when an opportunity comes up, should I say yes to this? Do I need to say yes to this? Right. Uh,
Yeah, it does. It's those kind of feedback loops do help you incrementally move toward that thing, whether or not you do cross the threshold. But I think there's different ways to get there. Or let's see, like some goals have a really thresholdiness to them, where you cross a line and then it exists, or what have you. But like the others are more where it's a way of being, and you're experiencing that on a regular basis of some sort. And either way, checking in and seeing a trajectory and some kind of like an indicator, a signal of like, well, here I am, where relative to where I want to be, and how do I feel about it? Because you can change where is it that we're trying to get, or how you're getting there, and that's, I don't know, those kind of checking in. I find it really nourishing overall. Like that's not the I don't know. I don't know if I would enjoy it as much if I didn't start, like, essentially, even with the sloppy version that I did in my teens, right? Just so rough. Um, but uh, yeah, because I don't know, like the inaccuracy, the failures, um, mm, I don't know, just not being able to consistently bring certain results about and get certain goals done, it's still helped, because then I can ask, well, why really is this happening, and make adjustments. So I don't know. And so the more of less of, I hope that, I don't know, everyone just finds a way to relate to this in a way that's serviceable for them, right? Because like once in a while I'll hear people react to goals, or like kind of associate goals and task management as like not a really healthy, nurturing thing, like almost like it's like an unreasonable wish, like a New Year's resolution that you haven't really prepared for, or whatever. And I think that's reasonable and understandable. But if that's where it all stops with someone's how they relate to goals and whatnot, it's I don't know. I feel like they're useful, and hopefully everyone finds their own way to do it, to relate to them and manage them and keep at it.
Rob, I think we did a podcast.
I think so too. Thanks, Jerzy.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone in the chat. This has been awesome. So many great thoughts about goals, and it's one of those things. I mean, we've talked about a lot, but it's clearly a big deal.
Yeah, I think it is. There was some questions in the chat. Nate's asking, are we going to be on hiatus next week, or will we have another show? I think we're planning on having another show, right?
Yeah, planning on it.
Yeah. So, yeah, at the top of the episode, maybe you weren't here, we were talking about like, oh, it's the last show of the year. Like, oh, wait, no, it's not. Yeah, we got another one next Thursday. So that is to say that we record the show every Thursday. We stream it live on YouTube. And then we collect that as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And we will be back next Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. And until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com. And I'm also Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody. Sorry again, Nate. Deep apologies for that.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.